She asked for a glass of water at the wrong house and left pregnant by the multi-millionaire owner. Jessica Parker had been walking for hours under the scorching New York City sun, her worn-out sandals leaving blisters on her feet as she went from company to company looking for work. The old bag hanging from her shoulder contained only a few crumpled resumes and the last coins remaining from her previous life. When she saw the imposing gate of the mansion in the Upper East Side neighborhood, she didn't think twice before ringing the bell. She just needed a glass of water to continue her search. What she didn't know was that this decision would change her life forever. "Please, could you give me a glass of water?" she asked when the gate opened, revealing a tall man in a dark suit who looked at her curiously. Michael Reynolds had just arrived from the office when he heard the bell. Normally the staff would answer, but that day he went to the gate himself. The woman in front of him was visibly exhausted, her hair stuck to her skin with sweat, and her simple clothes marked by fatigue. "Of course. Please come in," he said, opening the gate completely. Jessica hesitated. This wasn't what she expected. She thought he would bring the water right there, but the man was already walking towards the main entrance of the house. "That's not necessary, sir. Just a glass of water is fine," she insisted, but Michael was already climbing the marble steps. "Come. You must be thirsty and hungry too," he said without looking back. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Jessica followed the man into a spacious room, with leather sofas and a dining table that could easily seat 20 people. She felt out of place in that luxurious environment, conscious of her simple clothes and the sweat dripping down her forehead. "Have a seat. I'll have something prepared for you to eat," said Michael, pointing to one of the padded chairs. "It's not necessary, sir, just the water," repeated Jessica, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. Michael watched her for a moment. There was something about this woman that intrigued him. Perhaps it was the dignified way she carried herself despite her obvious need, or the way her eyes showed determination even in vulnerability. "Margaret," he called, and a middle-aged woman appeared quickly. "Yes, Mr. Michael." "Prepare a plate for our guest, something substantial," he ordered, then turned back to Jessica. "What's your name?" "Jessica Parker," she replied, finally sitting in the chair he had indicated. "Pleasure, Jessica. I'm Michael Reynolds. What brings you here?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jessica drank the glass of water that Margaret brought, as if she hadn't had anything to drink in days. Michael watched her every move, noticing how her hands trembled slightly and how she tried to hide how much she was in need. "I'm looking for a job," she said after drinking all the water. "I've already visited several companies today." "What field do you work in?" asked Michael, genuinely interested. "Administration. I graduated from a private college on a scholarship. I worked for a small company, but it closed last month," explained Jessica, trying to maintain her dignity as she told her situation. Margaret returned with a generous plate of homemade food. The aroma made Jessica's stomach growl loudly, and she blushed with embarrassment. Michael pretended not to notice, but internally wondered how long it had been since she'd had a decent meal. "Eat," he said simply. "We'll talk later." Jessica ate slowly, trying to appear polite despite her hunger. The food was delicious, and with each bite she felt her strength returning. Michael watched in silence, scrolling on his phone, but his eyes kept returning to her. "Do you have family here in New York City?" he asked as she was finishing. "No. I came from the countryside when I got the college scholarship. My parents passed away when I was a teenager," answered Jessica, her voice catching slightly when mentioning her parents. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. He himself had lost his father early and knew what it was like to grow up without that figure. His mother, Mrs. Elizabeth, had struggled a lot to raise him and his brother alone until she married again. "And where are you living now?" he continued. "In a boarding house downtown, but—" She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I couldn't pay this month. I have until tomorrow to get the money or I'll have to leave." Michael was silent for a moment, processing the information. There was something about that woman that touched him in a way he couldn't explain. Maybe it was her dignity in adversity, or the way she wasn't asking for pity, just an opportunity. "I need someone to manage the house," he said suddenly. "Margaret is getting older and needs help. Would you be interested?" Jessica looked at him with surprise and suspicion. Things were moving too fast, and she couldn't understand why a stranger was being so generous with her. "I can't accept charity, sir," she said, rising from the chair. "It's not charity, it's work." "I'd pay well and you'd have a room here in the house," insisted Michael, also standing up. "Why? You don't even know me," questioned Jessica, her eyes shining with held-back tears. Michael stepped closer to her, and Jessica could smell his expensive cologne. For a moment, they looked at each other in silence, and she felt something strange in her stomach, a sensation she couldn't define. "Sometimes the right people appear at the right time," he said softly. Jessica felt her legs weaken. The stress of the last few days, the lack of proper food, and the emotional roller coaster of that unexpected encounter took their toll. The world started to spin around her. She started to say, but the words wouldn't come out. Michael realized she was losing consciousness and quickly caught her before she fell. Jessica fainted in his arms, and he carried her to the nearest sofa. "Margaret! Margaret, quick!" he shouted, fanning Jessica with a paper. "What happened, Mr. Michael?" asked the housekeeper, running into the room. "She fainted." "Call Dr. Wilson, say it's urgent," ordered Michael, checking Jessica's breathing. Raphael's private doctor arrived in less than an hour. After examining Jessica, who had regained consciousness but was still weak, he spoke with Michael in private. "She's dehydrated and clearly malnourished. She probably hasn't eaten properly for a few days. She needs rest and regular meals," explained Dr. Wilson. "Can she be admitted to my hospital?" asked Michael. "That would be ideal, at least for one night, for intravenous hydration and observation." Michael returned to the room where Jessica was lying on the sofa, with Margaret applying cold compresses to her forehead. "Jessica, I'm going to take you to the hospital for some tests," he said gently. "I don't have money for a private hospital," she murmured, trying to sit up. "Don't worry about that. The important thing is for you to get well," replied Michael, helping her up. At the hospital, Jessica was admitted for observation. Michael stayed until she fell asleep, arranging for her to have a private room and all necessary care. When he left, it was late at night, and he found himself thinking about her all the way home. The next morning, Michael went to visit her at the hospital. Jessica was visibly better, with color in her face and more alert. She seemed embarrassed by the whole situation. "How are you feeling?" he asked, approaching the bed. "Much better, thank you. And embarrassed too," she replied, avoiding looking directly at him. "Why?" "For fainting at your house, for costing money I don't have to pay." "Don't think about that," interrupted Michael. "The job offer still stands." Jessica looked him in the eyes for the first time since he had arrived. There was sincerity there, but also something else she couldn't identify. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked again. Michael sat down in the chair next to the bed. For a moment, he questioned his own motivations. There was something about that woman that awoke in him a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. "Maybe because I recognize strength when I see it. You could have begged for money. You could have lied about your situation. But you chose to only ask for water and to work for your dignity," he said, surprising himself with his honesty. Jessica felt tears welling up in her eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had seen her as strong. In the last few months, she had felt like just another unlucky person trying to survive in a big, indifferent city. "If I accept the offer, when can I start?" she asked, finally giving in. "When you're discharged. How about this afternoon?" That afternoon, Jessica left the hospital accompanied by Michael. He took her first to the boarding house where she lived to get her few belongings, paid the debts she had with the landlady, and then led her back to the mansion. The room Michael had assigned to her was on the upper floor, near the other staff's rooms. It was simple but comfortable, with a single bed, a small closet, and a window that looked out onto the backyard garden. "Margaret will explain your duties," said Michael. "If you need anything, just ask." "Thank you," said Jessica, feeling out of place in the luxurious surroundings. "I promise you'll regret this." "I won't regret it," replied Michael, and something in his tone made Jessica look at him more carefully. Their eyes met and held for a few seconds that seemed to last forever. Jessica felt her heart race and quickly looked away. "I'll let you get settled," said Michael, leaving the room and closing the door behind him. Outside, he leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. What was happening to him? In 35 years of life, he had never felt so attracted to someone he had just met. Jessica, for her part, sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she was desperate and without prospects. Now she had a job, a place to live, and a boss who treated her with a kindness that left her confused. Margaret knocked on the door and entered, carrying a tray with tea and cookies. "I came to welcome you, dear," said the woman, sitting in the room's only chair. "How long have you worked for the Reynolds family?" 15 years, Margaret replied with a smile. "Ever since his mother, Mrs. Elizabeth, moved to the smaller house in Greenwich Village. Before that, I worked for her too." "And what's it like working here?" asked Jessica, genuinely curious. "Mr. Michael is a good boss. Fair, pays well, has never treated me badly. But he's very lonely," said Margaret, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Lonely?" "He works too much, hardly has any friends who visit, has never brought a girlfriend home. His mother is always worried, wants him to get married and have children." Jessica felt a strange pang in her chest at the thought of Michael with a wife and children. Why did that bother her? She barely knew him. "Your job will be to help with organizing the house, receiving mail, coordinating with suppliers, and occasionally accompanying Mr. Michael to social events when he needs it," Margaret explained. "Social events?" repeated Jessica, alarmed. "It's nothing major, dear. Sometimes he needs to go to business dinners or company events and doesn't like to go alone. The last assistant who did that was Amanda, but she left 6 months ago." "Why did she leave?" Margaret hesitated for a moment. "Let's just say she got confused about the nature of her job," she finally said. Jessica understood the implication and felt a discomfort. What if Michael expected something more than just professional work from her too? What if she had been wrong about his intentions? That night, Jessica had dinner in the kitchen with Margaret and the other staff. She met Charles, Michael's driver, a man in his 60s who had worked for the family for decades, and Betty, the cleaning lady who came 3 times a week. Michael came home late from the office and ate alone in the dining room. Jessica could see him through the slightly open kitchen door and noticed how tired and distant he seemed. "Why doesn't he eat in the kitchen with everyone else?" she asked Margaret. "It's always been that way. Since he was little, Mrs. Elizabeth taught him that there was the family's space and the staff's space. It's not out of malice, it's just the way he was raised," Margaret explained. After dinner, Jessica went up to her room and tried to sleep, but she couldn't. The bed was too comfortable compared to the thin mattress at the boarding house, and her mind wouldn't stop processing everything that had happened. Around 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Through the crack under the door, she saw light passing by. Someone was awake. Curious, she got up and opened the door a crack. She saw Michael going down the stairs, wearing only a t-shirt and pajama pants. He seemed unable to sleep too. Jessica quickly closed the door, but her heart was racing. There was something intimate about seeing him like that, vulnerable and human, far from the image of the successful businessman he projected during the day. The next morning, Jessica woke up early and went down to the kitchen. Margaret was already preparing breakfast and Michael was reading the newspaper in the dining room. "Good morning," Jessica greeted when he looked up. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" he asked, and Jessica noticed his eyes looked tired. "Yes, very well, and you?" "Michael is fine," he said. "You don't need to call me sir." Jessica blushed slightly. "Okay, Michael." The name came naturally from her lips, and she liked how it sounded. Michael seemed to like it too because he smiled for the first time since she'd met him. "Margaret will explain your routine. If you have any questions, you can ask me," he said, getting up from the table. "Michael," Jessica called out as he was leaving. "Yes?" "Thank you. For everything." He looked at her for a long moment, and Jessica felt that strange feeling in her stomach again. "You're welcome, Jessica," he said softly, before leaving. Jessica's first days in the mansion passed quickly. She adapted easily to the routine, organizing mail, coordinating deliveries, and learning the habits of the house. Michael was a polite but distant boss, always courteous but maintaining a certain formality. Jessica discovered that he woke up early every day, had coffee alone while reading 3 different newspapers, left for the office at 8 on the dot, and rarely returned before 9 in the evening. On weekends, he locked himself in his home office, working or taking calls. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. A week after her arrival, Jessica received her first paycheck. The amount was 3 times higher than she expected, and when she asked Margaret about it, the housekeeper just smiled. "Mr. Michael is generous with those who work well," she said. That night, Jessica went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water and found Michael sitting alone in the dining room with several papers spread out on the table and a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Sorry, I didn't know you were working," she said, about to turn back. "No, stay. I really need a break," said Michael, running his hand through his hair. "How are you settling in?" "Very well. The house is beautiful, and Margaret is very kind to me," replied Jessica, approaching the table. "Sit with me for a while," he asked, indicating the chair beside him. Jessica hesitated, but something in his tone made her accept. It was the first time they had a more intimate conversation since that first day. "What are you studying so late?" she asked, looking at the papers scattered about. "Contracts. My company is negotiating an important merger," explained Michael, taking a sip of whiskey. "It must be very stressful to run a large company," commented Jessica. "Yeah, sometimes I wonder if it's worth it," said Michael, and Jessica noticed a sadness in his voice she hadn't detected before. "Why do you say that?" Michael looked at her as if assessing whether he could trust her. "My father built this company from nothing. When he died, I was 22 and had a huge responsibility on my shoulders. Since then, my life has been about working to maintain what he built," he explained. "And you have no other dreams? Things you'd like to do besides work?" Jessica asked gently. "I did. When I was younger, I wanted to travel, see the world, maybe have a family," said Michael, his eyes lost in distant memories. "You can still have all that," said Jessica. "Can I? At 35, single, with no prospect of a serious relationship?" He laughed bitterly. "Why no prospect of a relationship?" asked Jessica, feeling her heart race with the question. Michael looked directly into her eyes. "Because the women I meet are either interested in my money or intimidated by my life, and I've never felt a real connection with anyone." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Jessica felt as if there was something unspoken in the air between them, something dangerous and tempting. "Perhaps you're looking in the wrong places," she said softly. "Perhaps," agreed Michael, not looking away. They stared at each other for a moment that seemed to last forever. Jessica felt an attraction so strong she had to fight the impulse to move closer to him. Michael seemed to feel the same, his eyes briefly dropping to her lips. "Jessica," he began, his voice huskier. "Yes," she whispered. Before either could say anything more, they heard footsteps in the kitchen. Margaret was preparing her bedtime tea. The moment was broken, and they both quickly pulled away. "I should probably go to bed," said Jessica, standing up quickly. "Of course." "Good night," said Michael, his voice returning to its formal tone. "Good night," she replied, leaving the room with her heart racing. That night, neither Jessica nor Michael could sleep. They both knew something had changed between them. A line had been crossed, even without explicit words or gestures. The next morning, Michael left earlier than usual, avoiding any encounter with Jessica. She, in turn, focused on her work, trying not to think about the previous night's conversation. But it was impossible. With every sound in the house, she hoped it was him returning. Every time the phone rang, her heart raced, thinking it might be Michael calling the house. Margaret noticed Jessica's tension and questioned her during lunch. "Did something happen, dear? You seem very distracted today." "No, everything's fine," Jessica lied. "Are you sure?" You didn't argue with Mr. Reynolds, did you?" "No, we didn't argue. Why do you ask?" "Because he was acting strange today, too. He forgot the documents he always takes. He barely ate breakfast," explained Margaret with a worried look. Jessica felt a pang in her chest. Michael was as affected by the previous night's conversation as she was. That afternoon, she received a phone call. Michael needed her to go to his office to pick up some urgent documents. The commercial building where Michael's company was located stood imposingly, all glass and steel in the financial district of New York City. Jessica felt small and intimidated as she entered the luxurious lobby. Michael's secretary, an elegant middle-aged woman named Deborah, greeted her with professional courtesy. "Mr. Michael is in a meeting, but he left the documents ready," she said, handing a folder to Jessica. "Thank you," Jessica replied, but hesitated before leaving. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. What's it like to work with Mr. Michael?" Deborah studied her for a moment before answering. "He's an excellent boss, fair, intelligent, determined, but also very lonely. In 12 years working for him, I've never seen him truly happy," she said sincerely. "Why do you think he's lonely?" "Because he dedicates all his energy to work. He has no time for friends, relationships, hobbies. It's as if he's afraid to allow himself to be happy," Deborah observed. Jessica absorbed these words all the way back home. Michael was building walls around himself, protecting himself through work and distance. When she arrived at the mansion, Michael had already returned and was waiting for her in the dining room. "Did you get the documents?" he asked as she entered. "Yes, they're right here," she said, handing him the folder. "Thank you," said Michael, but made no move to get up. "Jessica, about last night." "You don't need to explain anything," she interrupted quickly. "Yes, I do. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable working here," he said, avoiding looking directly at her. "I don't feel uncomfortable," Jessica answered honestly. Michael finally looked at her. "No? No? Just confused," she admitted. "I'm confused too," Michael confessed. "Jessica, I need to be honest with you. I feel something I shouldn't be feeling." Jessica's heart began to beat faster. "What?" "Attraction. A connection. Things I haven't felt in a long time," he said, standing up and moving closer to her. "Michael, I know it's wrong. You work for me. You depend on me financially. It would be an abuse of power," he continued, stopping just inches from her. "What if I said I feel the same way?" asked Jessica, surprising both of them with her courage. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting with himself. "I'd say that complicates things even more," he replied. They were so close that Jessica could feel the heat emanating from his body. The tension between them was almost palpable. "Maybe it doesn't have to be complicated," she whispered. Michael opened his eyes and looked at her intensely. "Jessica, if we take this step, there's no going back, and I don't want to hurt you." "What if I'm willing to take the risk?" This time, Michael couldn't resist. He put his hand on her face, stroking her cheek with his thumb. "Are you sure?" "I am," she replied, moving even closer to him. Michael kissed her. It was a soft kiss at first, almost hesitant, but it quickly grew more intense as Jessica responded, wrapping her arms around his neck. When they parted, both were breathing heavily. "This changes everything," said Michael, resting his forehead against hers. "I know," replied Jessica. "And do you regret it?" "No," he said without hesitation. "And you?" "No, I don't." They kissed again, this time with more urgency. Michael lifted her into his arms and carried her to the sofa, where they continued kissing with growing passion. Michael's hands explored Jessica's body over her clothes, and she felt as if she were on fire. She hadn't felt such intense desire in years, and she had never felt so connected to anyone. "Jessica," Michael moaned between kisses, "you're incredible." She responded by pulling him closer, lost in the sensation of having him in her arms. At that moment, nothing else existed except the two of them. But then Michael stopped abruptly, pulling away from her. "What is it?" asked Jessica, confused and excited. "We can't do this here. Margaret could be back any moment," he said, running his hands through his messy hair. "Then let's go somewhere else," suggested Jessica, still lost in the moment. Michael looked at her with desire, but also with inner conflict. "Jessica, maybe we should think this through." "I don't want to think," she interrupted, moving closer to him again. I want to feel. Michael's resistance crumbled. He scooped her up into his arms and carried her to his bedroom on the upper floor. What happened that night was an explosion of passion and connection that neither of them had ever experienced before. Jessica woke up in Michael's arms the next morning, feeling complete in a way she never had before. He was already awake, watching her tenderly. Good morning, he whispered, kissing her forehead. Good morning, she replied, snuggling closer to him. How are you feeling? Asked Michael, stroking her hair. Good. Really good, said Jessica, smiling. And you? Confused, but happy, he admitted. They lay in silence for a few minutes, processing what had happened between them. Michael, what does this mean for us? Jessica finally asked. I don't know, he answered honestly. I know I don't regret it, and I know I want more nights like that one. But I also know our situation is complicated. Because of work, because of everything. The social difference between us, the fact that you depend on me, what people will think. Jessica pulled away from him, sitting up in bed. Michael, if you're having regrets... I'm not having regrets, he said quickly, sitting up too. I'm just being realistic about the challenges we'll face. So you want to try? She asked hopefully. Michael looked at her for a long moment before answering. I do, but we need to be discreet, at least at first. Jessica agreed, although part of her wanted to shout to the whole world that she was in love with Michael Reynolds. The days that followed were the happiest of Jessica's life. During the day, she and Michael maintained their professional formality, but at night they became passionate lovers. They talked for hours, sharing dreams, fears, and stories from their lives. Jessica discovered that Michael was far more complex than he appeared. Behind the facade of the successful businessman was a sensitive man who genuinely cared about his employees and dreamed of making a difference in the world. Michael, in turn, grew more enchanted each day by Jessica's intelligence and strength. She had her own opinions about everything, wasn't intimidated by his money or social status, and challenged him in ways no one else dared. You know what I find most attractive about you? Michael said one night as they lay in his bed. What? Asked Jessica, playing with the hair on his chest. You see me as a man, not as the millionaire Michael Reynolds. With me, you're just yourself, no masks, he replied, kissing the top of her head. It's because that's how you make me feel. Safe, accepted, said Jessica. I love you, Michael said suddenly, the words escaping before he could stop them. Jessica lifted her head to look at him, her eyes shining. I love you too, she answered, and they kissed tenderly. 3 weeks after that first night together, Jessica started feeling nauseous in the mornings. At first she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted for several days in a row, a terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. She managed to leave the mansion without raising suspicion and bought a pregnancy test at a pharmacy far away. Back in her room, she locked the door and took the test with trembling hands. Positive. Jessica sat on the bed, staring at the test in shock. She was pregnant with Michael's child. They had been careful most of the time, but there had been a few nights when they got carried away by passion. Tears began to stream down her face. How could this have happened? Her life had finally taken a positive turn. She had found love, and now everything could fall apart. How would Michael react? They had only been together for a month. Would he think she had planned this to gain financial security? Would he think she was just another woman trying to take advantage of him? Jessica hid the test at the back of the drawer and tried to act normally during dinner. Michael noticed she was quiet, but attributed it to tiredness. That night, when Michael called her to his room, Jessica made up an excuse that she wasn't feeling well. She needed time to think about how to tell him about the pregnancy. During the next few days, Jessica avoided being alone with Michael. He noticed the change in her behavior and grew worried. Jessica, is something wrong? He asked one afternoon, managing to corner her in the house library. No, everything's fine, she lied, avoiding looking directly at him. No, it's not. For 3 days you've been avoiding me, barely speaking to me, making excuses not to come to my room, said Michael, moving closer to her. If I did something wrong... You didn't do anything wrong, Jessica interrupted. Then what is it? He insisted, placing his hands on her shoulders. Jessica looked into his eyes and saw genuine concern there. For a moment she almost told him everything, but fear paralyzed her. "I'm just tired. The work, all of this is new to me," she said. Michael didn't seem convinced, but didn't press further. "All right, but if you need to talk, I'm here," he said, kissing her forehead before leaving the library. That night, Jessica made a decision. She would tell Michael about the pregnancy the next morning. He had a right to know, and she needed to face the consequences, whatever they might be. But fate had other plans. The next morning, Jessica woke up early and went down to the kitchen, determined to find Michael after breakfast. But when she entered the dining room, she encountered a scene that made her blood run cold. Michael was sitting at the table with a stylish blonde woman Jessica had never seen before. They were talking intimately, and the woman was holding his hand across the table. "Margaret, who is that woman?" Jessica asked in the kitchen, trying to keep her voice calm. "That's Victoria Campbell, daughter of Mr. Michael's most important business partner. They've been friends since they were teenagers," explained Margaret. "Friends?" repeated Jessica, feeling her world collapse. "Well, the family always hoped they would marry." "It would be a perfect business union," Margaret added absently. Jessica felt nauseous, and this time it wasn't because of the pregnancy. She ran to the downstairs bathroom and threw up everything she had eaten for breakfast. When she came out of the bathroom, she bumped into Michael in the hallway. "Jessica, are you okay? You're pale," he said, concerned. "I'm fine," she lied, trying to get past him. "Wait," said Michael, holding her arm. "I want to introduce you to someone." Jessica wrestled internally. She didn't want to meet the woman who would probably be Michael's future wife, but she couldn't refuse without seeming strange. "Victoria, this is Jessica, my new personal assistant," Michael said when they returned to the dining room. "Pleasure," said Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jessica immediately realized the woman was sizing her up as a potential threat. "The pleasure is mine," replied Jessica, forcing a smile. "Michael told me you've been helping him a lot with organizing the house," Victoria continued. "It must be difficult working with someone so perfectionistic." There was something in Victoria's tone that suggested an intimacy with Michael, a knowledge of his habits and personality that came from years of acquaintance. "Actually, it's easy to work with Mr. Michael," replied Jessica formally. "Mr. Michael?" repeated Victoria, laughing. "So formal. I've called him Mike since we were kids." Jessica felt as if she'd been slapped. The familiarity between Michael and Victoria was obvious, and she felt like an intruder. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to do," said Jessica, quickly leaving the room. Michael watched her leave, confused. There was something strange about Jessica's behavior, something beyond what she had admitted. "She's pretty," commented Victoria when Jessica left. "She's a good employee," replied Michael distractedly. "Be careful, Mike. Women like that know exactly how to take advantage of generous men like you," said Victoria in a seemingly casual tone. "What do you mean by women like that?" asked Michael, frowning. "Poor, beautiful women who seemingly need help. They're masters at awakening the protective instinct of rich men," explained Victoria. Michael was irritated by the comment. "Jessica isn't like that. She's hard-working and honest." "If you say so," agreed Victoria, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "Anyway, I came to talk about my father's proposal. He's willing to invest another $2 million in the company's expansion, but he wants to close the deal soon." Michael forced his attention to the business conversation, but part of his mind remained worried about Jessica's strange behavior. Jessica, in turn, locked herself in her room and cried until she couldn't anymore. The reality of the situation was crystal clear now. Michael had a life, a social circle, family expectations that didn't include a former unemployed woman he had picked up off the street. What they had shared in the last few weeks had been real for her, but perhaps for him it was just a pastime, a distraction, while he didn't decide his future with someone from his own social class. And now she was pregnant. Jessica put her hand on her belly where a small being was growing. This baby would change her life forever. But how could she raise a child alone? How would she explain to the child that his father was a man who would probably marry another woman? A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Jessica, it's Michael. Can I come in?" "One moment," she said, quickly drying her face and trying to look presentable. When she opened the door, Michael entered and closed it behind him. His face showed genuine concern. "What's going on? Since last week you've been acting strange, avoiding talking to me, and today you were clearly uncomfortable during breakfast," he said, moving closer to her. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jessica tried to deny. "Jessica, you know me well enough to know I notice when something's wrong," said Michael, putting his hands on her face. "Please, trust me." The tenderness in his voice almost made Jessica break down. For a moment she wanted to tell him everything, throw herself into his arms and let him fix everything. But then she remembered Victoria in the dining room, the familiarity between them, Margaret's comments about the family's expectations. "It's about Victoria, isn't it?" asked Michael, interpreting her silence. "Why would it be about her?" questioned Jessica, trying to sound indifferent. "Because your behavior changed after you saw her," observed Michael. "Jessica, Victoria and I are just family friends. Our parents always wanted us to date, but there was never anything romantic between us." "And now?" asked Jessica, unable to hide the vulnerability in her voice. "Now what? Did she come here to talk business or to rekindle something between you?" Michael sighed. "Jessica, Victoria came to talk about an important investment her father wants to make in the company. But it's also true that she has expectations regarding me." "What kind of expectations?" "She thinks we should get married. It would be a union that makes sense from both a family and financial perspective," admitted Michael. Jessica felt her heart shatter. "And you? What do you think about it?" Michael put his hands on her shoulders. "I think it would be a terrible mistake. I don't love Victoria, I never have. I love you," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "But marrying her would solve a lot of problems, wouldn't it?" insisted Jessica. "Jessica, where are you going with this?" She moved away from him, fighting back tears. "Maybe you should consider her proposal. It makes sense, like you said, and I'm just a complication in your life." "You're not a complication," said Michael, moving closer to her again. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in years." "Michael, be realistic. What we have can't last. We're from different worlds. People will talk. Your family would never accept me." "I don't care what people will say or what my family thinks," Michael interrupted. "I care about you, about us." Jessica looked at him with a broken heart. She wanted to believe him, wanted to throw herself into his arms and forget all the complications. But the reality of her pregnancy weighed on her like a dark cloud. "Michael, I need to tell you something," she began, gathering her courage. "What?" But before she could continue, they heard Victoria's voice calling for Michael from downstairs. "Mike, I need to talk to you about the contracts." Michael cursed under his breath. "She can wait," he said. "No, go. It's important for your company," said Jessica, moving away from him again. "Jessica, we'll finish this conversation later, okay?" said Michael, leaving the room reluctantly. When she was alone, Jessica made an impulsive decision. She couldn't stay there any longer, pretending everything was fine while watching the man she loved be courted by another woman, and she couldn't tell him about the pregnancy, knowing it might force him into a decision he might not want to make. She quickly packed a bag, taking only the essentials. She left a letter on the bed explaining that she was leaving and that he didn't need to worry. She thanked him for everything he had done for her and asked him not to try to find her. Jessica left through the back door of the house, avoiding the living room where Michael and Victoria were discussing business. She walked to the main street and took a bus to downtown, not knowing exactly where to go. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Michael only discovered that Jessica was gone when he went up to her room that night and found the letter. He read her words over and over, trying to understand what had happened. In the letter, Jessica said she had realized she was getting in the way of his life and his future plans, that what they had shared had been wonderful, but that she couldn't continue being a complication in his life. She asked him to be happy and to find someone from his own world who could give him the life he deserved. Michael crumpled the letter in anger and frustration. How could Jessica just leave without giving him a chance to fight for their relationship? How could she decide alone what was best for both of them? He spent the first weeks trying to find her. He hired detectives, visited the boarding house where she lived before, searched the public hospitals in the city, but Jessica had completely disappeared. Jessica, for her part, had gotten a job as a waitress in a small restaurant in Queens, New York City. She lived in a rented room in a family home and struggled to survive on the low salary while dealing with the morning sickness of pregnancy. The first months were the most difficult of her life. She missed Michael with an intensity that physically hurt. Many times she picked up the phone to call him, but always chickened out at the last moment. 4 months into her pregnancy, Jessica finally found the courage to have her first ultrasound. When she saw the image of the baby on the screen, she cried with both emotion and sadness at the same time. It was real. A life was growing inside her, a life that was half hers and half Michael's. "Is the baby okay?" she asked the doctor. "Perfectly normal. Do you want to know the sex?" "I do." "It's a girl." Jessica smiled through her tears. A girl. She put her hand on her belly, which was just starting to show, and whispered, "Hi, little one. I'm your mommy." That night, alone in her small room, Jessica looked at the ultrasound image and made a decision. She would tell Michael about the pregnancy. He had the right to know he was going to be a father, regardless of his feelings for her. But when she arrived at the mansion the next day, she discovered that Michael had traveled abroad for a series of business meetings. According to Margaret, he wouldn't be back until the following month. Jessica decided to wait. When Michael returned, she would tell him everything. Michael had accepted the business trip as an attempt to forget Jessica. In recent weeks, Victoria had intensified her advances, and the family pressure for them to get married was mounting. Part of him considered accepting the proposal, not out of love, but for convenience and to try to move on. During his absence, Victoria practically moved into the mansion, supervising renovations she said were necessary for when they got married. Margaret watched all this with distaste, knowing Michael didn't love that woman. When Michael returned from abroad, he found Victoria settled in his house as if she were the owner. She had changed the decor, replaced furniture, and even fired some long-time staff she considered dispensable. "What is all this?" asked Michael as he entered the dining room and saw the changes. "Surprise. I decided to modernize the house a bit." "Don't you like it?" said Victoria, hugging him. "Victoria, this is my house. You can't just change everything without consulting me," said Michael, pulling away from her. "I thought you'd appreciate the initiative. After all, when we get married, I'll be living here too," she replied casually. "When we get married," repeated Michael. "Victoria, I never said I was going to marry you." "Mike, don't be dramatic. We know it's just a matter of time. Daddy is waiting for the official announcement to close the investment deal," she said, trying to kiss him. Michael pulled away again. "I need to think," he said, leaving the room. That night, alone in his room, Michael realized he had made a decision. No matter the family pressure or the financial advantages, he couldn't marry Victoria. He still loved Jessica, and marrying another woman would be unfair to everyone involved. The next morning, Michael was determined to look for Jessica again. But his plans were interrupted when Margaret came to him, visibly nervous. "Mr. Michael, there's a young lady outside who says she needs to speak with you. She says it's urgent," informed Margaret. "What young lady?" asked Michael, secretly hoping it was Jessica. "I don't know her name, but she's pregnant," said Margaret. Michael's heart stopped for a moment. Was it possible? He ran to the entrance of the house and found Jessica standing outside the gate, with a round belly visible beneath her simple dress. "Jessica," he whispered, not believing his eyes. "Hi, Michael," she said nervously. "I need to talk to you." Michael immediately opened the gate and let her in. They went to the library, away from curious ears. "You're pregnant," said Michael, still processing the information. "I am." 6 months, confirmed Jessica. Is it mine?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from the timing. "It is," replied Jessica. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. I was confused, scared." Michael moved closer to her and placed his hands on her belly, his eyes filling with tears. "A child," he murmured. "Our child." "It's a girl," said Jessica softly. Michael looked into her eyes, and she saw all the emotion he was feeling. "Why did you leave without telling me?" he asked. "Because I thought it would complicate your life even more. Victoria was here, talking about marriage, and I didn't want you to feel obligated to stay with me because of the baby," explained Jessica. "Jessica, I love you. I loved you before I knew about the baby, and I love you even more now," said Michael, placing his hands on her face. "I never felt obligated. I've missed you every single day. But what about Victoria and your family? And what will they say when they find out you got the maid pregnant?" questioned Jessica, her insecurities still present. "I don't care what they say. You're not the maid. You are the woman I love. And as for Victoria, I'll make it clear to her today that there is no future for us," said Michael firmly. "Michael, marry me," he said suddenly, kneeling in front of her. "What?" asked Jessica, shocked. "Marry me, Jessica. Not because you're pregnant, but because I can't imagine my life without you. Because I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone," said Michael, holding her hands. Jessica looked at him through the tears streaming down her face. "Are you sure? You won't regret it when the novelty wears off?" "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," replied Michael. "You and our baby are all I want." "Then yes," said Jessica, smiling through her tears. "I accept." Michael stood up and kissed her with all the passion and love he had held back during the months they were apart. When they separated, both were crying with happiness. "I will take care of you and our daughter forever," promised Michael. "And I will love you forever," promised Jessica in return. But their happiness was interrupted when the library door swung open abruptly. Victoria entered without knocking, stopping short when she saw Jessica in Michael's arms. "What is going on here?" asked Victoria, her eyes going from Michael to Jessica's belly. "Victoria, I need to talk to you," said Michael, stepping away from Jessica. "She's pregnant," observed Victoria, her voice cold. "And by the way you were embracing, I assume it's yours." "It is," confirmed Michael without hesitation. Victoria's face twisted with anger. "You slut!" she screamed at Jessica. "You planned all of this, didn't you? Showed up here playing the poor little thing, seduced Michael, and now you're trying to hit the jackpot with this pregnancy." "Don't speak to her like that," said Michael, stepping between Victoria and Jessica. "Michael, you're being naive. She's a gold digger," insisted Victoria. "Enough, Victoria. Jessica is not a gold digger. And even if she were, it wouldn't change the fact that I love her," said Michael firmly. "You love her?" repeated Victoria, incredulous. "Michael, you've known me since we were children. Our families have always planned our union. Are you going to throw all of that away for a nobody?" "Watch your words, Victoria," warned Michael, his voice dangerously low. "I can't believe you're choosing her over me," screamed Victoria, completely losing her composure. "I'm not choosing. There was never a choice because I never loved you, Victoria. We were always just friends, and you know that," said Michael with cruel honesty. Victoria looked at him as if she'd been slapped. "You will regret this, Michael. When this tramp leaves you and takes half of everything you own, you'll remember my words," she said, storming out of the library and slamming the door. Jessica was trembling, shaken by the scene she had witnessed. "Michael, maybe she's right. Maybe you should—" "No," interrupted Michael, hugging her again. "Don't let her words get to you. She's angry and said horrible things, but none of that changes how I feel about you. But your family is really going to hate this. And the company. The company is mine, and my family will have to accept it. As for what people will think, I honestly don't care," said Michael. "Jessica, you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. Our baby will be born into a home full of love. That's all that matters." Jessica let herself be convinced by his words, snuggling into his arms. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. But she didn't know that Victoria wouldn't give up so easily. In the days that followed, Michael treated Jessica like a queen. He insisted she move into the master bedroom with him, hired the best doctors to monitor the pregnancy, and started making plans for the wedding. "Do you want a big ceremony or a small one?" he asked one morning as they had breakfast in bed. "Small," Jessica answered without hesitation. "Just us, your family, and a few close friends." "My mother will want to meet you before the wedding," said Michael, stroking her belly. "Are you ready for that?" "I'm nervous but ready," said Jessica. What if she doesn't like me? She will. How could she not? Said Michael, kissing her. Mrs. Elizabeth, Michael's mother, came for lunch at the mansion the following weekend. She was an elegant woman in her 60s, with neatly styled grey hair and an aristocratic bearing. Jessica wore her best dress, which still seemed simple next to Mrs. Elizabeth's elegance. She was visibly nervous when Michael made the introductions. "Mother, this is Jessica, my fiancée. Jessica, my mother, Elizabeth," said Michael, putting his arm around Jessica's waist. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Elizabeth," Jessica said politely. Mrs. Elizabeth studied her for a long moment before answering. "The pleasure is mine, dear. Congratulations on the baby," she said, but her tone was formal and distant. During lunch, Mrs. Elizabeth asked several subtle questions about Jessica's past, her family, and her education. Jessica answered honestly, but she could feel she was being judged with every word. "And where did you two meet?" asked Mrs. Elizabeth. "Jessica worked here at the house for a while," replied Michael, omitting the details of how she had shown up asking for water. "I see," said Mrs. Elizabeth, and something in her tone suggested she really understood more than was being said. After lunch, Mrs. Elizabeth asked to speak with Michael in private. Jessica stayed in the living room, trying not to listen to the conversation happening in the library, but their raised voices reached her. "Michael, are you sure you know what you're doing?" asked Mrs. Elizabeth. "I am, Mother. I love Jessica," replied Michael. "My son, I know she's beautiful, and you're excited about becoming a father, but marriage is a serious decision. Do you really know her well enough?" "I do, yes. And I'm not getting married because of the baby. I'm getting married because she's the love of my life. Michael, Victoria was here yesterday. She told me some worrying things." "What kind of things?" asked Michael, his voice becoming tense. "That Jessica showed up here under suspicious circumstances, that you got involved very quickly, that she might only be interested in your money." "Mother," interrupted Michael, "I can't believe you're listening to Victoria. She's bitter because I didn't want to marry her." "Son, I'm just worried. You are very generous, very trusting, and there are women who know how to take advantage of that. Jessica is not like that. If you really knew her, you would know that." "I hope you're right, Michael. But promise me you'll get a prenuptial agreement." "Mother, promise me. If she really loves you, she won't mind signing." Michael was silent for a moment. "All right. I'm going to talk to her about this." When Mrs. Elizabeth left, Michael found Jessica in the living room, visibly upset. "Did you hear the conversation?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Not on purpose, but your voices were loud," admitted Jessica. "Your mother doesn't like me." "She just needs time to get to know you better," said Michael, putting his arm around her. "Michael, about the prenuptial agreement." "Jessica, you don't have to sign anything you don't want to. I don't care what my mother thinks about it." "But I do care," said Jessica. "I want your family to know I'm not after your money. I'll sign the agreement." Michael looked at her with admiration and love. "Are you sure?" "I am. If it will reassure your mother and prove my intentions, I have no problem with it." They were married in a small but elegant ceremony in the mansion's garden. Jessica wore a simple but beautiful wedding dress that accentuated her 7-month baby bump. Michael couldn't stop smiling as they exchanged vows. Mrs. Elizabeth was present, as was Michael's younger brother, Nathan, a few close friends, and Margaret, who cried with emotion seeing her boss finally happy. "You look beautiful," whispered Michael, when the priest declared them husband and wife. "I love you," Jessica replied before kissing him. The honeymoon was brief, just a weekend at a romantic inn in the mountains, since Jessica was too close to her due date to travel long distances. But they were 2 perfect days, where they could focus only on each other and the baby that was about to arrive. "What should we name her?" Michael asked one night, his hand on Jessica's belly. "I was thinking about Sophia," said Jessica. "It means wisdom. I want our daughter to be smart and strong." "Sophia Reynolds," Michael tested the name. "It's perfect." 2 weeks after the wedding, Jessica began to feel the first contractions. Michael immediately took her to the hospital, nervous and excited at the same time. The labor was long and difficult. Jessica struggled for almost 12 hours before Sophia was finally born. When Michael saw his daughter for the first time, he cried like he had never cried in his life. "She's perfect," he said, holding the tiny being in his arms, "just like her mother." "She has your eyes," observed Jessica, exhausted but radiant. Sophia Reynolds had dark hair like her mother and brown eyes like her father. She was small but healthy and cried with impressive strength for someone so tiny. In the first few months after Sophia's birth, Jessica and Michael lived in a bubble of happiness. They took turns caring for the baby, slept little, but were completely in love with little Sophia. Michael became a dedicated father, changing diapers, giving bottles, and singing lullabies. Jessica was surprised by how naturally he took to fatherhood. "I never imagined you singing 'Hush, Little Baby,'" she joked one night, finding Michael in the nursery trying to get Sophia to sleep. "Neither did I," admitted Michael, laughing softly so as not to wake the baby. "But apparently it works." They were so absorbed in their new routine with the baby that they almost forgot about their external problems. But reality soon caught up with them. Mrs. Elizabeth visited Sophia regularly, and although she was polite to Jessica, she still kept a certain distance. Her preference for spending time with Michael and her granddaughter when Jessica wasn't present was clear. One day, Jessica overheard a conversation between Mrs. Elizabeth and Michael that left her disturbed. "Son, Sophia is beautiful, but I'm worried about the effects this whole situation might have on the business," Mrs. Elizabeth was saying. "What effects, Mother?" asked Michael. "Well, your partners are talking. Some important clients were surprised by your marriage. And Victoria, well, she's spreading rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "About how Jessica came into your life, about how quickly everything happened. She's insinuating that Jessica set everything up to gain financial security." Jessica felt her blood run cold. Even married and with a daughter, she still had to deal with suspicions about her intentions. "Mum, I don't want to hear this anymore. Jessica is my wife, and anyone who doesn't like it can go to hell," Michael said categorically. "Michael, I'm just trying to protect you and our family, and now Sophia too," insisted Mrs. Elizabeth. That night, Jessica confronted Michael about the conversation. "Do people really think I planned all of this?" she asked, with Sophia sleeping in her arms. "Some ignorant people, yes, but I don't care what they think," replied Michael. "But you should care. If this is affecting your business, my business is my problem. My family is my priority," Michael said firmly. But secretly he was worried. Some important clients had made comments about his hasty choice, and Victoria really was using her social influence to spread malicious rumors about Jessica. The situation worsened when Victoria organized a social dinner, inviting several important people from Michael's business circle. She deliberately did not invite Jessica, only Michael. "It's a business dinner, darling. I'm sure Jessica will understand," said Victoria when Michael questioned Jessica's absence from the guest list. Michael hesitated. On one hand, he didn't want to leave Jessica out. On the other, they were important clients, and his presence could be crucial for some deals. "Go," encouraged Jessica when he told her about the dinner. "I know it's important for the company." "I don't want to leave you alone with Sophia," said Michael. "We'll be fine. Margaret can help me if I need anything," insisted Jessica. Michael went to the dinner but regretted it almost immediately. Victoria had clearly orchestrated the situation to humiliate Jessica in her absence. During the dinner, she made several subtle but poisonous comments about women who marry for money and about successful men who need to protect themselves from fortune hunters. "Michael has always been very generous, sometimes too generous," Victoria said to a group of guests, loudly enough for Michael to hear. "We hope he's learned to be more selective." Michael got up from the table in the middle of the dinner. "Excuse me," he said, leaving Victoria's house without ceremony. When he got home, he found Jessica nursing Sophia in the living room. The peaceful domestic scene contrasted violently with the toxic environment he had just left. "How was the dinner?" asked Jessica, looking up. "Awful," admitted Michael, sitting down beside her. "Victoria used the occasion to attack you indirectly. I shouldn't have gone. What did she say? Michael hesitated, then decided to be honest. Insinuations about gold-digging women, comments about men who need to protect themselves. Nothing direct, but everyone understood who she was referring to. Jessica closed her eyes, clearly hurt. Jessica, don't let this affect you. The people who matter know who you really are, said Michael, hugging her and Sophia. But those people don't know me. To them, I really do look like an opportunist who got pregnant to secure my future, said Jessica sadly. Then they can go to hell, Michael said vehemently. I won't let anyone mistreat you, not even indirectly. In the following months, Michael took a more aggressive stance in defending Jessica. He cut off business relations with companies whose owners made disrespectful comments about his wife, and made it clear in his social circle that any disrespect toward Jessica would be considered disrespect toward him. This attitude, while admirable, had consequences. Some important deals were lost, and the company began to feel the financial impact of Michael's decisions. Nathan, Raphael's younger brother, came to talk to him about the situation. Michael, I understand you want to protect Jessica, but you're harming the company, said Nathan during lunch. The company has survived until now. It will keep surviving, replied Michael. But at what cost? You've already lost 3 important contracts this month. The employees are worried about their jobs, insisted Nathan. Do you think I should bow to social pressures? Pretend I'm not married to please prejudiced clients? Questioned Michael. That's not it. But maybe you could be more diplomatic. Not everything needs to be a battle. Michael considered his brother's words. Perhaps there was some truth there. His confrontational attitude might be causing more harm than good, not just for him, but for everyone who depended on the company. That night, he talked to Jessica about the situation. Michael, if your company is suffering because of me, maybe we should reconsider some things, said Jessica. What do you mean? Maybe I should stay more in the background for a while, not appear at social events, let you rebuild your professional relationships. Jessica, you are my wife. I won't hide you as if you were something I'm ashamed of, Michael said categorically. It wouldn't be hiding. It would be a temporary strategy, argued Jessica. No, we'll find another solution. The solution came from an unexpected source. Margaret, who had observed the whole situation in silence, brought surprising information. Mr. Michael, I need to tell you something, she said one morning, clearly nervous. What is it, Margaret? It's about Victoria. I overheard a conversation she had with the secretary last week when she came to pick up some things she had forgotten here. What conversation? She was planning to spread a lie about Jessica. She said she was going to make up that Jessica had other relationships before you, that the baby might not be yours. Michael turned pale. She said that? She did. And more. She said she has a journalist friend who can publish an article about businessmen deceived by opportunistic women, using you as an example. Michael felt an anger he had never experienced before. One thing was to attack him, but attacking Jessica and questioning Sophia's paternity was something else entirely. Margaret, are you sure of what you heard? Absolutely, Mr. Michael. I even recorded part of the conversation on my phone because I thought I might need proof, said Margaret, showing the device. Michael listened to the recording, and his anger turned into cold determination. It was time to put an end to Victoria once and for all. The next day, Michael called a meeting with the company's main partners and some important clients. Victoria was present, as was her father, the main investor. Gentlemen, I've called this meeting to clarify some misunderstandings that have been circulating about my personal life, Michael began. Victoria looked at him with suspense, clearly not expecting this. I have heard rumors and insinuations about my wife, Jessica, and about the circumstances of our marriage. I want to make a few things clear. Michael then told the real story of how he met Jessica, omitting only the most intimate details. He spoke about her dignity, about how she tried to refuse his help multiple times, about how she insisted on signing a prenuptial agreement. My wife is not an opportunist. She is a hard-working and honest woman who found herself in a difficult situation and reluctantly accepted my help. Our relationship developed naturally, based on mutual love and respect. Then Michael played the recording Margaret had made of Victoria's conversation. The silence in the room was deafening when the recording ended. Victoria was pale, clearly shocked at being exposed. "Michael, I can explain you," she began. "There's nothing to explain, Victoria." "Your intentions have become clear," Michael interrupted, "and I want to make it clear to everyone here that I will no longer tolerate attacks on my family. Whoever has a problem with my wife has a problem with me." Victoria's father stood up, clearly embarrassed. "Michael, I apologize for my daughter's behavior. This does not represent the values of our family or our company," he said, giving Victoria a disapproving look. "Daddy!" protested Victoria. "Enough, Victoria. You've embarrassed yourself today," said her father, leaving the room. In the following days, the story spread through Michael's social circle, but this time, the comments were in Jessica's favor. People admired the way Michael had defended his wife and condemned Victoria's behavior. Victoria herself disappeared from social life for a few weeks, ashamed of the scandal she had caused. "Do you think I did the right thing?" Michael asked Jessica that night. "I think you defended our family in the only way possible," replied Jessica. "Thank you for fighting for us." "I will always fight for you," promised Michael, kissing her. With the scandal resolved, Jessica and Michael's life returned to normal. The company recovered the business it had lost, and they were able to focus on being a happy family. Sophia was growing quickly, filling the house with joy and laughter. At 6 months, she was already trying to sit up by herself, and at 8 months, she took her first steps, to Michael's delight. "She's going to be an athlete," Michael would say, every time Sophia demonstrated some physical ability. "She'll be whatever she wants to be," Jessica would correct him, but she smiled seeing her husband's pride. Mrs. Elizabeth, finally convinced of Jessica's sincerity after the episode with Victoria, began to treat her with genuine affection. She even offered to help Jessica go back to school. "I've always wanted to get a master's degree," Jessica confessed during a family dinner. "Then do it," Michael immediately encouraged her. "I can take care of Sophia when you have classes." "And I can help too," offered Mrs. Elizabeth. "It would be a pleasure to spend more time with my granddaughter." Jessica enrolled in an MBA program in management, fulfilling a long-held dream. It was challenging to balance studies with motherhood and marriage, but Michael and Mrs. Elizabeth supported her completely. During one of her classes, Jessica met other women who had restarted their careers after becoming mothers. Conversations with them made her reflect on her own future. "Michael, I have a proposal for you," she said one night after Sophia had fallen asleep. "What proposal?" "I want to work with you at the company, not as a favor, but as a qualified professional," said Jessica. Michael looked at her with surprise and interest. "In what area?" "Human resources. I can help create programs for employee mothers, improve maternity leave policies, create a more inclusive environment," Jessica explained. "That's an excellent idea," said Michael, excited. "The company really needs to modernize those policies. And I can also work on social projects. I know what it's like to be in a vulnerable situation. I can help other women who are going through what I went through." Michael felt proud seeing the woman he loved transforming into a leader and visionary. "Let's do it," he said, "but on one condition." "What?" "That you let me participate in the social projects too. I want to help people, just like you helped me find meaning in life." Jessica smiled and kissed him. "I accept the condition." 2 years later, Jessica had become a respected executive at Michael's company. Her social projects had helped hundreds of women in vulnerable situations, offering job opportunities, professional training, and psychological support. Sophia, now 2.5 years old, was a happy and intelligent child who called Michael Daddy with all the affection in the world, and Jessica Mommy with equal adoration. "Want more babies?" asked Michael one evening while they watched Sophia playing in the garden. "You mean you want more children?" asked Jessica, smiling. "I do. Our family feels incomplete," admitted Michael. "Then let's try to make a little brother or sister for Sophia," agreed Jessica. 6 months later, Jessica discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Michael was present when she took the test, and they cried with happiness together. "Do you think it will be a boy or a girl?" asked Michael, placing his hand on Jessica's still flat stomach. "It doesn't matter. They will be loved just as much as Sophia," replied Jessica. During this second pregnancy, Jessica continued working until the 8th month. Michael worried, but she insisted that she felt well and wanted to continue with her projects. "You are incredible," said Michael, watching her during a presentation to investors about the company's social programs. "I'm just doing what I love," replied Jessica. The second baby was born on a spring morning. It was a boy, whom they decided to name Ethan, in honor of Jessica's grandfather. Sophia was delighted with her little brother, insisting on helping with everything, from changing diapers to giving him his bottle. "I'll take care of Soph," she said in her child's voice, making Michael and Jessica laugh. With 2 small children, life became busier, but also richer. Michael became an even more dedicated father, and Jessica managed to balance motherhood with her work at the company. "I never imagined I could be this happy," said Michael one night, watching Jessica breastfeeding Ethan and Sophia sleeping on the couch beside them. "Me neither," agreed Jessica. "Sometimes it feels like all of this is a dream." "If it's a dream, I never want to wake up," said Michael, kissing her forehead. 5 years had passed since that day, when Jessica had rung the mansion's doorbell asking only for a glass of water. Now she was Jessica Reynolds, a respected executive, beloved wife, and mother of 2 wonderful children. The company had become a benchmark in social responsibility, thanks to the programs Jessica had created. She had founded an NGO that helped women in vulnerable situations, offering not only material assistance, but also real opportunities to start life over. "I never thought a glass of water could change so many lives," joked Michael during an anniversary party. "It wasn't the glass of water that changed everything," corrected Jessica, smiling. "It was the kindness of a man who decided to look beyond appearances." "And the courage of a woman who accepted to take risks for love," returned Michael. Sophia, now 7 years old, and Ethan, 5, ran through the mansion's garden, laughing and playing. The house that was once silent and lonely was now full of life, love, and happiness. Mrs. Elizabeth, who had become a doting grandmother, watched her grandchildren with affection. "You made my son happy in a way I never could," she said to Jessica during the party. "He made me happy too. We complete each other," replied Jessica. "You are proof that true love exists even when it arises in the most unlikely places," observed Mrs. Elizabeth. That night, when the guests had left and the children were asleep, Michael and Jessica sat in the garden watching the stars. "Any regrets?" asked Michael. "None," replied Jessica without hesitation. "And you?" "Only that I didn't meet you sooner," said Michael, pulling her into his arms. "We met at the right time. I needed to be ready for you, and you needed to be ready for a different life," observed Jessica. "True. And now?" "Now we live happily ever after, like in fairy tales," joked Jessica. "Better than fairy tales because this is real," said Michael, kissing her under the stars, and it really was real. The love that had been born from a simple act of kindness had transformed into a solid family, a prosperous company, and hope for hundreds of other people who, like Jessica, just needed an opportunity. The story that began with a desperate woman asking for water had become a legend of love, perseverance, and generosity that inspired everyone who heard it. Jessica and Michael knew they would still face challenges in the future, that life is never perfect, and that there would always be obstacles to overcome. But they also knew that together they could face anything. Because true love isn't just about passion or romance. It's about companionship, mutual support, shared growth, and the daily decision to choose each other, regardless of the circumstances. And that was the choice Jessica and Michael made every day, from that first night they gave themselves to each other to all the years they would live together from then on. Sophia and Ethan grew up in a family full of love, learning from an early age the values of kindness, generosity, and hard work. They often heard the story of how their parents met, and they grew up believing in the transformative power of love and compassion. When Sophia turned 18, she decided to follow in her mother's footsteps, studying business administration and developing an interest in social work. Ethan, at 16, showed a talent for engineering like the grandfather he never knew, but he had also inherited his father's generous heart. "You've raised amazing children," said Mrs. Elizabeth, now 80 years old, watching her grandchildren during a family gathering. "They raised themselves. We just gave them love and guidance," Jessica replied humbly. "Don't underestimate your influence. You showed them that it's possible to succeed in life without losing your humanity," the elderly lady observed. Michael, now 50, had passed the presidency of the company to Nathan, keeping only an advisory role. This gave him more time to dedicate to social projects and his family. Jessica, at 43, had become a sought-after speaker, telling her story of overcoming adversity to women across the country. Her NGO had expanded to several cities, helping thousands of people. "Sometimes I wonder where we'd be if you hadn't rung that doorbell," Michael said during one of their morning walks in the garden. "You'd probably be married to Victoria, unhappy and bitter. And me, well, I'd rather not think about where I'd be," Jessica replied. "Fate brought us together," Michael stated. "Fate created the opportunity. We chose what to do with it," Jessica wisely corrected him. Victoria, incidentally, had married a few years later to a businessman from another city and moved away. Occasionally news came that she was doing well, but she never crossed paths with Jessica and Michael again. "Can you forgive her?" Michael asked once. "I forgave her a long time ago." "Resentment only hurts the person who carries it," Jessica replied. "Besides, in a way, I should thank her." "How so?" "If she hadn't attacked me so much, maybe I would never have found the strength to fight. Adversity made me stronger." This life philosophy was something Jessica had developed over the years. Every difficulty she faced had become a lesson. Every obstacle overcome had made her stronger and wiser. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Michael organized a surprise party for Jessica. He invited not only family and friends, but also many of the women who had been helped by Jessica's social programs over the years. "I want you to see the real impact you've had on people's lives," Michael said when Jessica realized who the guests were. One by one, the women came forward to thank Jessica. There were former employees who now had their own businesses, single mothers who had found decent jobs, and young people who had earned scholarships. "Mrs. Jessica, without you, I'd still be on the streets," said a young woman Jessica had helped years before. "You did it for yourself. I just opened the door," replied Jessica, moved. "You didn't just open the door. You taught me that I deserved to walk through it," insisted the young woman. By the end of the night, Jessica was crying with emotion. "Thank you," she said to Michael. "It was the best gift you could have given me." "Seeing you happy is what makes me the happiest," replied Michael. "You know what else moves me the most?" said Jessica, looking around the party. "Seeing that our story has multiplied. Every life we've touched has touched other lives. It's an endless circle of kindness. Like that glass of water you asked for. A small kindness that turned into something gigantic," observed Michael. "Exactly. That's why we should never underestimate the power of a simple act of kindness. We never know where it might lead." Sophia and Ethan, now adults, watched their parents with admiration. "I want to have a marriage like yours," said Sophia. "And I want to be a father like you," said Ethan to Michael. "Then be kind, be generous, be true to each other," advised Jessica. "The rest comes naturally." Years passed, and the story of Jessica and Michael became a legend in the city. It was told as an example that true love exists, that kindness is rewarded, and that it's never too late to start over. Universities invited Jessica to give lectures on social entrepreneurship. Business magazines wrote articles about how Michael had transformed his company into a benchmark for social responsibility. But for them, the most important things were the simple moments: family dinners, conversations in the garden, playing with the grandchildren who started arriving when Sophia got married. "Grandpa Michael, tell the story of how you met Grandma," asked little Emma, Sophia's daughter, during visits. And Michael would tell it, always with the same affection and emotion as the first time, about how a courageous woman had rung his doorbell asking only for water and ended up changing his life forever. "And then they lived happily ever after," Emma would ask. "We are living happily ever after," Jessica would correct, hugging her little granddaughter. Because that was the truth. They really did live happily ever after, not because they didn't face difficulties, but because they faced everything together, with love, respect, and companionship. The mansion where it all began remained the family home, but now it was always full of life, laughter, and love. The garden where Michael and Jessica had exchanged vows saw generations grow and multiply. Margaret, now retired but still living in a house on the mansion's grounds, watched it all with the pride of someone who had witnessed the birth of a great love story. "I always knew that girl was special," she would say to anyone who would listen. "From the very first day I saw kindness in her eyes, and there really was kindness. Kindness that found kindness, love that found love, two souls who recognized each other and decided to build a life together based on humanity's most precious values." The story that began with a simple thirst had turned into an endless source of love, hope, and inspiration, and it would continue to flow, generation after generation, reminding everyone that miracles happen every day, disguised as simple acts of kindness. Jessica and Michael knew they had been blessed, not just for having found each other, but for having known how to value and care for the love they received. They understood that true love is both a gift and a responsibility, something that must be cultivated, protected, and shared. And that's what they did their entire lives. They cultivated their love, protected their family, and shared their happiness with the world, proving that sometimes the happiest endings begin with the most unlikely beginnings. End of the story. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe that simple acts of kindness can really transform lives, like what happened with Jessica and Michael? Leave your opinion in the comments and share if you've ever experienced or witnessed something similar. If you like this story, don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one. Thanks for the company.